Welcome back to the Wartime Military Podcast. On April 7th, 1945, high above Tokyo Bay, Japanese ace Lieutenant Saburo Sakai stared through his gun sight at something that violated the very laws of aerial warfare. Nearly 100 single-engine American fighters, sleek, fast P-51 Mustangs, were escorting B-29s over the capital. This was impossible. Japanese intelligence was certain no fighter could make the 750-mile journey from Iwo Jima. As he watched the silver swarm, Sakai muttered into his oxygen mask, "This cannot be happening." What does a pilot feel when he realizes his sanctuary has been breached and the mathematics of his defeat are circling right above him? Next, we will delve deeper into this story.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into sources around one of the really pivotal moments in the Pacific War, the final air campaign over Japan itself. This wasn't just about pilot skill, it was, well, a clash between overwhelming industrial power and, frankly, outdated ways of thinking. Okay, let's jump right in. Picture this. It's April 1945, high above Tokyo. You're a Japanese fighter pilot. You've been told repeatedly your home islands. They're safe from American single-engine fighters. The ocean's just too big. Then you look up, and you see almost 100 P-51 Mustangs, sleek silver, just circling way up at 25,000 feet. The question hits you immediately, how? How did they manage a 1,500-mile round trip over empty ocean? A trip your own intelligence said couldn't be done.
Right, that impossible trip. And what's really key here is that making it possible depended on two things lining up just right. First, you have the sheer cost and logistics, that brutal 36-day fight for Iwo Jima. Taking that tiny volcanic rock gave them the perfect staging point, exactly 750 miles out from Tokyo. That was absolutely critical.
The forward base.
The forward base, yes. But the second piece, equally important, was pure technical cleverness. The expendable drop tank. Revolutionary, really.
It sounds almost minor, a drop tank, but it changed everything, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely everything. You really can't overstate it. These were simple things, pressed aluminum. Sources suggest they cost maybe $15 each to make, which, given wartime material needs, was pretty remarkable engineering itself. Because they were aluminum, not steel, they were light, easy to mass produce, and crucially, you could just jettison them. They stretched the Mustang's combat radius out to 850 miles.
Enough to get there and back.
Exactly. Without that little disposable tank, Iwo Jima is just this incredibly costly, isolated airstrip. But with it, suddenly the Japanese homeland, their sanctuary, it was wide open.
So this deep dive, then, is really about digging into that impact. What happens when that massive industrial might, that technological edge, finally smashes up against an enemy fighting fiercely but relying on, well, ideology? We're tracing those P-51 missions from Iwo Jima, the human cost of just getting there, the tech that made it possible, and the psychological blow that really accelerated the end of the war in the Pacific.
It's a fascinating intersection of strategy, technology, and human endurance.
Let's start with that price tag for the base itself, Iwo Jima. The sources really emphasize how planners knew it was vital, but getting that 8 square miles, February 45, cost 6,821 American lives.
Yeah, and almost the entire Japanese garrison, nearly 21,000 men, fought literally to the last man. It was an unbelievable price for a forward base.
And for the pilots arriving, the war wasn't over on the ground, was it?
Not even close. The pilots from the 15th Fighter Group, they landed on these contested airfields barely 2 weeks after the invasion even started. They weren't setting up in nice tents or barracks. No, they were digging foxholes right there on the airfield, while Japanese soldiers were still, popping out of caves and tunnels nearby.
So the environment was just hostile, constantly.
Relentlessly. Volcanic ash everywhere, that constant, horrible smell of sulfur. Their staging area wasn't just near a battlefield, it was an active battlefield.
And then from that, they had to get into this tiny cockpit and fly for 8 hours, an 8-hour mission in a single-engine fighter.
Yeah.
That's just staggering, the mental load alone.
It's almost hard to comprehend. It demanded this relentless focus, maintaining tight formation, constantly watching your fuel, absolute concentration for hours and hours. And here's the bit the sources really hammer home. No safety net. No rescue ships positioned along the route. That was the official word.
Nothing. Just empty ocean.
Just empty ocean. If your engine quit, if you got lost in weather, if you miscalculated fuel, That was it. You either made it back to that tiny speck of Iwo Jima or you vanished into the Pacific, period.
Having rescue ships, even just a few, would change the mental game entirely. But knowing there's absolutely nothing, the stress before even seeing combat must have been enormous.
Absolutely enormous. And layered on top of that was this specific engineering issue with the P-51 itself, something pilots called the fuel
Oh,
paradox.
yes, the fuselage tank.
Exactly. To get that incredible range, the Mustang had this big 85-gallon tank right behind the pilot's seat.
Which you needed for the distance, but it sounds problematic.
It was, definitely. When that tank was full, which it had to be at the start, it shifted the plane's center of gravity way back. Think of it like trying to drive a sports car fast with a trunk full of bricks. The handling got loose, the plane felt unstable. The sources quote pilots saying it felt sluggish, unresponsive, and vulnerable.
So they were flying this amazing fighter, but it was deliberately handicapped for the first part of the flight.
Precisely. They had to burn off that fuel in the fuselage tank first, just to get the plane feeling right, to make it agile enough for combat before they even got near Japan.
That must have just shredded their nerves during those first few hours over water. 3 hours just listening to the engine, knowing the plane isn't handling optimally.
It absolutely did. Pilots talked about this thing, this psychological effect called enhanced hearing. Every tiny noise, every little vibration from the engine, any flicker on a gauge, it got magnified in their minds into, potential disaster. Constant hyper-alertness, always worrying about the engine quitting or running out of fuel, alone over that endless ocean. Just surviving the trip was a battle.
Okay, so given all that operational stress, that sheer difficulty just getting there, they must have had incredible faith in the plane itself, the Mustang. Once they arrived over Japan, how did it actually perform against the Japanese fighters, like the Zero? Let's talk about that technological edge.
Well, the difference by 1945 was stark.
Yeah.
Really stark. The P-51D with that big Packard Merlin engine, we're talking 1,695 horsepower, could hit speeds up to 437 miles per hour, way up high. The Mitsubishi Zero, even the later versions, was still running on its Nakajima Sakai engine, about 11,130 horsepower, its top speed, maybe 351 miles per hour.
It's so an 86 mile per hour difference. That's that's huge in a dogfight. It means the Mustang dictates the terms.
Completely. The Japanese pilot literally couldn't run away if the Mustang pilot didn't want them to. It's the difference between having control and just reacting, really. But it wasn't just the hardware. That speed advantage was massively amplified by this huge gap in pilot training and experience.
Right, because Japan's veteran pilots were mostly gone by then.
Pretty much wiped out. By 1945, the pilots Japan was sending up often had minimal training. Some sources say as little as 40 to 70 total flight hours. Think about that.
Wow. Compared to the Americans.
The American pilots arriving on Iwo Jima typically had 300 to 600 hours, often with combat time already under their belts, plus extensive gunnery training. It was a massive mismatch.
And this combination, the speed, the better trained pilots, it led directly to that specific American tactic, the boom and zoom, right? Designed specifically for the Zero.
Exactly. American tacticians knew the Zero was still dangerous if you got slow and tried to turn with it. It was incredibly nimble at low speeds. So the rule, drilled into every Mustang pilot, was simple. Never ever slow down and try to turn with the Zero. That was just asking to get shot down.
So what did they do instead?
Use your advantages, speed and altitude. You dive down on the Zero from above, that's the boom, make a high-speed firing pass with those 6.50 caliber machine guns, and then critically use the Merlin's power to climb straight back up and weigh the zoom. You refused to get drawn into a low-speed turning fight where the Zero had the edge. You hit hard and got out fast.
Textbook. And effective immediately, like with Major James Tapp, the first Army ace over Japan.
Textbook. Tapp used it perfectly. But, you asked earlier, was it just the plane speed or is there more to the strategic collapse? And the industrial reality behind it all is just as critical.
How so?
Because by 1945, Japan's ability to maintain its air force was falling apart. They didn't have spare parts. Their factories were getting hammered by B-29s. And crucially, fuel. Their aviation fuel was often contaminated, and sources say they had only about 8% of the high-octane fuel they actually needed.
So the Mustang wasn't just a faster plane. It represented an entire industrial system that was still running at full tilt.
Precisely. It was flying on basically unlimited supplies of high-quality 100-octane fuel. It was maintained by well-trained ground crews who kept availability rates incredibly high, like over 80%. The Japanese simply couldn't match that sustainment.
And the result in the air was immediate.
Devastatingly immediate. That very first big escort mission, April 7, 1945, the Mustangs shot down 21 Japanese planes for the loss of only 2 P-51s. The kill ratio in air-to-air combat consistently ran over 10 to 1. And just as importantly, the B-29 losses plummeted on escorted raids. Japan's entire air defense strategy trying to intercept the bombers, it just crumbled almost overnight.
It's easy to focus on the combat, the dogfights. But before we get to some specific human stories, we need to touch on what the sources say was the real danger for these Mustang pilots. It wasn't always the enemy aircraft.
No, not by a long shot. The statistics are actually quite sobering. The biggest killer, by far, was just the operational environment, the sheer distance, the weather over the Pacific. Get this, fewer than 30 Mustangs were confirmed lost to Japanese fighters during the entire campaign over Japan. Fewer than 30. Compare that to the losses from just flying the mission.
Things like weather, engine trouble.
Exactly. Weather, mechanical failures, running out of fuel. The most brutal example is Black Friday, June 1st, 1945.
What happened that day?
A massive, totally unexpected weather front blew up right on the rat between Iwo Jima and the target area near Osaka. Just a wall of storms. The formations got scattered, pilots were blinded, lost. They had no way to navigate through it or around it effectively back then.
Yeah.
The sources record it tragically. 27 Mustangs and 24 pilots lost in one day. Not one of them shot down by the enemy, all lost to the weather and the ocean.
24 pilots in one day from weather.
Yeah. And overall, across the campaign, over 150 Mustangs were lost operationally. Weather, mechanical, fuel exhaustion, compared to less than 30 lost in actual combat. It really puts the enemy in perspective. The ocean itself was lethal.
That just underscores the incredible risks these pilots took every single time they flew, facing this vast, indifferent enemy, the Pacific, before even dealing with the human one. And that theme of personal risk, of fate, brings us to one of the most remarkable sort of intertwined stories from the Pacific War. It involves the famous Japanese ace Saburo Sakai and an American officer, Lieutenant Colonel Francis R. Stevens, Jr.
Yes, the Sakai-Stevens story. It's got this incredible twist involving a future U.S. president. So early in the war, Stevens was piloting a B-26 bomber, the Wabash Cannonball, over New Guinea. Saburo Sakai, flying his Zero, shot it down. Stevens was killed. Here's the twist. Lyndon B. Johnson, who was then a Navy commander and a congressman doing an observation tour, was originally assigned to sit in Stevens' co-pilot seat on that specific flight.
LBJ was supposed to be on that plane.
He was. But literally moments before takeoff, Johnson realized he'd forgotten his camera and dashed off the plane to get it. While he was gone, Stevens apparently told the others, let's not wait. Or maybe Johnson came back and Stevens insisted he take another plane. Counts very slightly. The point is, Johnson ended up on a different B-26. That substitute plane developed engine trouble shortly after takeoff and had to turn back, landing safely. The Wabash Cannonball, with Stevens, flew on and was shot down by Sakai.
A forgotten camera.
Oh, yeah.
And American history changes completely. Wow.
Incredible, isn't it? But the story doesn't end there. Decades later, Stevens' son, who became Colonel Francis R. Stevens, Jr., retired from the U.S. Army, made contact with Saburo Sakai.
They actually met.
They did. And the accounts of that meeting are deeply moving.
Yeah.
Sakai, apparently upholding a very deep warrior code, formally apologized to the son for killing his father in combat. And Stevens, the son, replied that he bore Sakai no malice whatsoever, recognizing that Sakai was, quote, performing the duty of a soldier, just like his father had been.
That's quite profound. A real moment of reconciliation between former enemies, understanding the duty involved.
It really is. It speaks volumes about that generation, I think.
Yeah.
And Sakai apparently felt a very strong connection, almost a spiritual responsibility. During their meeting, Sakai performed a traditional Shinto prayer over the elder Stevens' old West Point sweater. He explained to the son that this act, from the warrior who took his father's life, would help elevate the father's spirit in the afterlife.
Just extraordinary, the depth of that personal history.
And there's one final gesture. Sakai showed them his own personal memento, the tattered silk scarf he was wearing when he himself was gravely wounded, shot in the head. During air combat over Guadalcanal, he actually tore off a piece of this precious scarf.
He tore it?
Yes, and gave it to Colonel Stevens' daughter. She was remarkably training to become a pilot in the U.S. Air Force, following her grandfather's path. Sakai gave her the piece of his scarf as a kind of talisman for protection in the air, from one warrior generation to the next.
That story, that reconciliation, really bridges the gap from the raw combat to the bigger picture. So, looking back at the whole campaign.
Well, the results were undeniable. Between April and August 45, those P-51s flew 51 major missions from Iwo Jima. They destroyed 206 Japanese aircraft confirmed in the air, hundreds more on the ground. They established total air superiority over Japan.
And the strategic lesson was hammered home, wasn't it? The old idea that bombers could always get through alone was proven wrong. They needed effective long-range escorts.
Absolutely. The P-51 proved that conclusively. But beyond the doctrine, there's that deeper meaning, the one Saburo Sakai himself eventually articulated. He called the Mustang a magnificent aircraft. But more than that, he recognized it for what it symbolized. He said the P-51 was, and this is a powerful quote, American industrial civilization concentrated into 11,600 pounds of aluminum and steel.
Wow. Industry concentrated into a weapon.
Exactly. That was the crushing realization for Japanese pilots. Their courage, their superior spirit, as their doctrine preached, simply could not overcome an 86-mile-per-hour speed difference, superior tactics, and a basically limitless supply of fuel and spare parts. That technological and industrial gap was the final, inescapable psychological blow.
So the Mustang appearing over Tokyo wasn't just a military threat. It was a symbol of this overwhelming power that Japan simply couldn't match, a sort of silent, gleaming harbinger of inevitable defeat.
Which, makes you think. It leaves us with a question, really, for you listening today. If you look at conflicts now, geopolitical maneuvering, what unexpected technological edge or perhaps industrial vulnerability is being quietly developed or exploited right now that might represent a similar kind of silent, maybe even unacknowledged signal of a major shift, a modern harbinger of defeat?
Something to definitely think about. The hidden factors that underpin power. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the sources surrounding the P-51s over Japan.